Am I on the slides? Am I on the slides? Because I know it's been a bit of a. Are they coming up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can see that properly.
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. So I really enjoyed this task, Aki. I think it's a really lovely idea to research the different cultures. And my culture was Japanese culture. So no, I'm just going to try, and it's not working.
Well, the arrows button work, maybe.
Is that on? Is that working?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So the perinatal period in Japan. So 99% of women who carry pregnancies to term in Japan are married. And a lot of these women do stop working once they become pregnant or think about stopping working. So there's quite a lot of emphasis on resting and taking care of yourself. Japanese women are required by the Maternal Child Health Act to register their pregnancies with the local government, and are encouraged to be very vigilant with their pregnancy by using their Maternal Child Health Handbook, which is called Boshi Teko, which every mum is given. So a little bit like our red book, it's the, that might be an old photo now, but it's the blue book in the middle. They are required by law to register, as I've said, and this book actually follows the child throughout its life, so it doesn't kind of stop at 5 or anything. It goes all the way through to schooling. You put in there high school, so it's quite a sort of important book. Japanese women aren't allowed to gain much weight. The guideline is no more than 22 pounds. And a lot of what I've read said that this is followed quite strictly, and they'll be placed on a strict diet by their doctor, and they're weighed at all their appointments. And thinking about sort of food and things like that, sushi is not discouraged. Thinking about in Britain, you'll be discouraged from eating raw fish, but they will continue to eat raw fish. And it's also the first meal traditionally that's eaten after birth because it contains lots of proteins. During the 5th month of pregnancy, ladies will often go to a shrine dedicated for childbirth with their mothers or grandmothers, and they're given a sash to place around their bump. Keeping baby bump warm is a big priority, apparently, in Japan, and pregnant mums don't have their bump exposed even in warm weather. And I found it quite funny that the photo I had at the beginning is of Japanese ladies in bikinis, so perhaps that's different now. I don't know, we'll have to ask Hiroko. And there will also be an encouragement to eat warm foods, and things like sweets are classed as cold foods and would be avoided. So in labour and birth, they will be encouraged to be very active, but not to make lots of noise. Apparently quiet labour is expected with a strong use of breathing techniques, and there's a huge emphasis on using breathing. And C-sections and pain relief are always discouraged. And labour is seen to be a really good way of bonding mum and baby, makes mum mentally strong. And I think probably this is perhaps in the past, but it's screaming due to pain and discomfort of labour is usually frowned upon and considered a familial humiliation. So that's quite a scary prospect, I think. Mums always stay in hospital for about 4 to 7 days. And if they have a C-section, they'll stay up to 10 days. And historically, mums were to stay at home for 100 days to rest and bond. And this would often be in her mother's house. But in contemporary Japan, it's less followed, but it's still quite a normal thing for mum and baby to stay home for quite a significant amount of time. And as I said, if it's first baby, they'll often go and stay with their mum for a month. The umbilical cord is given large significance in Japan. It's often boxed and given to the family to take home. It will often be brought out on birthdays or throughout the child's life. It's quite a sort of feature within the home. And there were some articles that said if the child becomes very sick, it would be used to feed the child, because it's said to hold great power and aid recovery. And it's meant to be a very strong link to the well-being of the baby, which is why they keep they look after it in a special box and keep it in a special place. I thought that was really lovely, actually, because that umbilical cord is the real kind of link to mum and baby in utero, and how it's given such lovely importance. So Japanese parents participate in naming ceremonies called oshiekias, if I pronounce that right. Oshiekias take place roughly a week after the newborn has entered the world, but these are very intimate, and most relatives and friends aren't invited. It isn't uncommon for grandparents to come to the ceremonies, but it's mainly about the family time together, and to provide mum with rest and relaxation and recovery. And the babies wear entirely white during the ceremony as a symbol of purity, and they are presented with shodos during the naming ceremonies, which are ornamental plates which include their names and are typically placed on walls, and often they're named after grandparents. So newborn Japanese babies, sorry, I put bodies there, babies are believed to embody godliness. So they're always dressed in white right up until the 17th day. The country's native Shinto religion associates white with clean and untarnished. So when they reach 17 days, they're finally believed to be actual children rather than gods. And this is when they make their transition from white attire to the attire of different colours. Omi Yamari describes a prominent Japanese ritual that involves taking the baby to the nearest Shinto shrine. Girls and boys are taken between 31 and 33 days old, and they're dressed up in detailed kimonos. And this is for the children to get acquainted with the protective spirits. And this is when friends and family bring presents and gifts. And there's a sort of tradition of the baby's first meal being at 100 days. The first meal, 100 days ceremony, but it's more likely to be a parental feast rather than the baby eating all the food, because obviously 100 days is weaning kind of time, soft food time. So it's quite a sort of event for a feast. And perinatal care in Japan is considered quite important. There's quite an emphasis on it, but it seems to be around much around the well-being of the child rather than around the well-being of the self. If that makes any sense, it seems to be quite an emphasis on the mum needs to be strong for the child so that the child is strong. And COVID has really complicated matters for Japanese families and mums, because they do often go and stay with their parents. And this is obviously caused an increase in loneliness and mental health problems, and mums being very anxious, not having the support of their parents at a time that they would normally. Okay, so that's that. Let me just stop sharing. So now I'm just going to have to do a little interview with Hiroko. Sorry, hang on. So it would be, I think it's better if everybody else turns off their camera, then you'll get sort of a better interview type experience. So Hiroko, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, and yeah, just give us a little synopsis of you.
Yeah. So yeah, I was born in Japan. I'm from Osaka, which is one of the biggest city in Japan. So I'm quite living in the quite big city. So I think especially when I was younger, around at school, I never see any um, friends who are from outside Japan. So but I was always surrounded with Japanese, and the majority people have shared the same similar kind of values. And even in Osaka, it was like that. Nowadays, a little bit different. We have more international, peoples who are from very different countries. So yes, it is a little bit more about. So I was born that kind of place. Grew up in Osaka. I came to the UK 2012 to study. Since then, I'm living in London. So my whole family living in Japan. I pretty much I identify as myself as a Japanese. I also now got married with my husband, of course. Now he is from here, but so I have his family, but not my Japanese family. So as Jill said, during pregnancy, I didn't have any family, but my mom came over from Japan to help me. Um, so yes, so I'm currently working in CAMS as psychologist. Yes, this is about me. Did I miss anything? I can talk.
Tell us about your little boy.
Yes, of course. Yes. So I had a baby in 2019, so just before COVID pandemic. So yes, that's why I was able to have my mom from Japan. I had a baby in St. George's. Yes, and he's now is developing very well. He is a naughty little monkey, and he's enjoying his nursery. Yeah, I think everything is fine. But when I had a baby, had him, it was a little bit challenging. Of course, I think that many people find it very difficult or challenging to have a first baby. I think even in their own country. So yeah.
And so what do you think, there's anything that you really missed not being able to sort of have your baby in Japan, or what was it like to have a pregnancy in the UK?
Yeah, I think, of course, I think I missed a lot of, the support from my family and the friends, because I have some friends here, but majority of friends are in Japan, and they had already babies. So I wanted to ask a lot advice, or like some support, but I was not able to access this support much as I hope. As you said earlier, normally as a custom, many moms go back to their family. So I wanted to go back to my family parents' house to stay for about 1 month, just before birth. So they start preparing everything. I saw my sister was doing similar same thing, so I wanted to do that, but I was not able to do. So it was yeah, it was, I think. I think it was a little bit difficult for me to have less support here. Yeah, of course, and then that I missed a lot of food, Japanese food. So when I don't feel well, or if I feel a little bit, I missed my mom's food. I missed, of course, traditional Japanese flavor, like even sweets. Many Japanese sweets are quite healthy, so I could eat a little bit more than more. So it was, yeah, it was a little bit difficult, but at the same time, I think majority of things are shared a lot here. I had the support in NHS. I had a regular checkup. So yes, I think it's a mixed experience. I think I felt supported during pregnancy here, but in terms of the family and friends, yeah, I miss these supports.
And I think we had a little laugh about some of the things that I found and put on the presentation, because you said that you hadn't heard of some of them. I wonder what the kind of the things that you think of a Japanese woman and childbirth and pregnancy that would be a different culture to the UK that would stand out for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of traditions, ceremonies. I don't know here, maybe some people has ceremony, but I think that in Japan we have quite a lot of different type of ceremonies, even during pregnancy. So I was not able to do that. So my mom went to shrine and they sent it to me the kind of omamori we said, like some fortune thing. So we go to shrine and pray for the healthy baby and the safe birth. And then we got some like a dog symbols because dog has a lot of baby and their birth is quite easy. So in Japan, we think the dog is the symbol of the healthy, easy birth. So my mom sent me like a lot of dog things and then also like some belt to put around my belly. Then yeah, so these things I didn't have that, of course. Also, I had this, but I missed the opportunity to do ceremonies. But when I was in Japan last time, I did some ceremony in local shrine. I'm not very religious, but I think it's kind of part of custom. Like in Japan, there are not many religious people. Especially Shinto is more like a traditional religion, but it's integrated with our culture. So it's many people just follow do a lot of ceremony to pray for the health for the child.
And do you think a Japanese woman would find it easy in Japan to come forward if she was having difficulties with her mental health? Do you know of what the culture's like over there with sort of that sense of being able to ask for help?
Yeah, I think that here maybe a little bit more open about having mental health issues. Maybe especially in Osaka it might be different, but in countryside maybe a little bit more people might think it's a little bit more shameful. Because I think in Japan it's quite big country. It's so there are many different areas have different values. But yes, I think but generally it's getting better now. But still I think people might, for example, in Japan, like a mental health clinic, we have very different medical systems, but we don't need to go through GP to access mental health service. We can go directly to the service if you think it's necessary. So when you go there, the clinic name, many clinic put some more friendly name rather than proper serious mental health clinic because people think it's more easy to access. So I think these things show that some people still have a lot of discrimination or the barrier to access mental health support. But yeah,
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to see if anyone has got any questions or anything they'd like to ask. So I'm just going to open it up to the team. Has anyone got anything that they'd like to ask Hiroka about Japanese culture or childbirth, child rearing?
Thank you for sharing, and I thought it was really interesting, your presentation, Jill, and what Hiroko has told us. It seems everything's so calm compared to what we're experiencing in general. So I wonder, how do they manage to make it so calm? Maybe there's something to learn there for all of us and to embed into the westernized, if you want, cultures, really. Achieving that level of feeling calm and pain management, being calm.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe we are good at the present in that way, but I think massive difference from here. In Japan, childbirth rate is much lower than here. So in Japan, we are the one of the problem we have is a dropping babies number every year. So we have more than we have much more elderly people than newborn babies. So that is our national crisis is difficulty. So when I was in St. George's, it was so overcrowded. I was, especially I had a baby in September. So I was told the one of the busiest time in a year. So in the ward, everything was very busy or very crowded. But I think in Japan, because we don't have many childbirth. Of course, so in the maternity ward, there every day the newborn baby was, is there. But so I think it's really factually is actually is we have less babies was born. But I think I don't know in terms of the calmness. I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know why you think we are doing a bit calmly. I don't know. Maybe you see something or I mean,
I wonder how, with it being so calm, actually, how many women are pressured to be calm and not be able to perhaps be what they need to be as well in that. And just, is healthcare free in Japan, or is it insurance based, or?
yeah, so it's a very different system we have. Basically, we have we don't have health free like not like NHS. So for example, when you are employed, you get some insurance number. So you can get the card with insurance number. So whenever you need to go to doctor to see doctor, you take the number to the doctor. So you don't need to go to local one. You can choose anywhere from any. So if you are traveling to Tokyo, even you are living in Osaka, you can access doctor with insurance number. It works valid in Japan. Then if you are not working, for example, if you are maternity leave or if you are employed, government give you number. So and then also depend on your income. Some people might need to pay 20% of the cost. Some people don't need to pay at all. So it depends on the age and also the income. So it's quite a good system, I think, because you can choose anywhere you need to go. So dentist, you don't need to. You can also use the insurance number. So generally, first initial appointment with doctor, it's maybe 20 pound maximum. But if you have, of course, like injections or any treatment, you have to pay a little bit more. And if you pay more than, I don't know, certain amount per year, then government covered over so you don't need to pay. For example, if you go to hospital, you are hospitalized or have a big surgery, you don't need to pay thousand pound. Government will cover the rest of the money. And the childbirth as well. I don't know why, because of a strange system, we can't use health insurance number for the childbirth. So we have to pay as cash first, or you have to get money from or local authority. So you can choose anywhere you want to have baby, and then you can pay. Each hospital or clinic has different fees. So you can choose which one you want to, and then government, local authority pay certain amounts. So if you want to go expensive one, you can go, but you have to pay maybe 20 pound, maybe more than 200 pound extra or something. So yeah, it's a lot of choice, but very different system.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Haruka, thank you very much for coming. It's been really special to have you. You're welcome to stay. We've got 3 more different cultures. I know you've got a session to go to, but if you're welcome to stay for as long as you can.
Thank you very much. It was very nice to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to Shireen, who's up next? Are you ready, Shireen?
I hope I am. It's unfortunate it's not as good as Jill's presentation, and I don't have any participants. But yeah.
I know Jill set the bar high there.
I know it's just way too high. I wish I was before Jill. So yeah, I'm just share my screen. It's For some reason, it won't share. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Nope.
Oh, I think it's just loading.
Oh, I need to stand up.
Can you see it now?
Yeah. Yeah. I like
I'm
you
not
both
sure.
chose the same font.
Yeah, I think Jill stole my idea, but yeah. So I'm going to be
That's funny, isn't it? We both chose the same colour.
I'm going to be talking about the traveling community, but in particular just the Romani tribe. So these are just a few different facts, how they do pregnancy and sort of childbirth practices differently. So I think I'm not going to read all the slide, I'm just going to summarize. So basically, when a woman becomes pregnant within a Romani family, she's immediately goes into isolation. So for them, it's not always a magical experience. And this is a term called marry me, and it translates to being unclean. So due to the woman being unclean, any utensils that she's touched have to be thrown away to prevent further contamination, which sounds a bit strange, but it's completely logical reasoning in the Romani tribe. In addition to this, mum, the mother-to-be, will also not allowed to touch her husband unless she also has gloves on as well. And this will last up until the baby is born. In fact, until the baby's been baptized. There's also a superstition around untying knots, and they believe that untying these knots will ensure that the umbilical cord isn't, wrapped around the baby's neck, and that you can have a nice, easy birth. So they will untie dressing gowns and belts and ribbons and stuff like that to ensure that there's no problems with the umbilical cord. So, like I said before, mum is in isolation until the baptism. And during this time, the baby's name can't be spoken whatsoever until he's been christened. And sometimes the baby's not referred to by their first name. They will use their middle name. Keeping the bloodline going. So in sort of strict Romani culture, keeping the bloodline going is very important to them, and sometimes they can often marry second cousins just to keep this bloodline pure. I can send these slides afterwards. Getting rid of anything a pregnant woman touches, like I said before, if a pregnant woman touches stuff, these are thrown away because she is considered unclean up until the baby is born and has been baptized. So yeah, during pregnancy, because mum's in isolation, sometimes dad needs to take on some of the roles, traditional roles, even though he's not around for the 9 months either. He tends to stay away as well. Like I was saying before about the names, this is, in order to trick the spirits. It's necessary that the first name is given, even though it will never be used, a child's second name in their true given name by the Roma, and it's used only amongst the Romani community. So that's what I was saying before, that they tend not to use the baby's first name because they would like to trick the spirits. And also with people outside of their culture, you wouldn't use the first name or maybe the second name as well. Okay, so this one's quite interesting, is that woman means midwife. So in the community, when a pregnant woman may say that she's seen a midwife, you know, check baby's okay, she may not mean a midwife in a hospital on a ward. It may be the elders within the community that are taking care of her while her husband is away. So they have particular rituals when the baby is born for the father to sort of acknowledge the baby. This can be swaddling the baby, placing the baby on the floor, and the father can, there's one way of the father dripping blood on the baby, acknowledging that this is his child, or wrapping a bit of red string around the baby's neck to symbol the bond between father and child. So Romani children, there's a high expectation that they learn the ways and customs of this lifestyle. So even though in the community they're quite guarded and tend to do everything in the community, they often have their babies in a hospital, and this is so they do not contaminate their homes. So they have a firm belief in which ways are best to keep spirits away, and for the solid 9 months, these methods are followed strictly. So all the practices that they do, such as isolation, not touching stuff, keeping people away, that's done throughout the 9 months, and it's due to, you know, they don't want to be cursed or get any bad luck. And once the baby is born and baptized, the whole community will help to raise this child. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very, very different, isn't it?
Yeah, especially compared to the first one. I was just thinking how lonely it must be to be a pregnant Romani lady.
I felt, you know, if we're working with a woman from that community, it probably would be quite difficult, because some advice we say is, you know, meet up with friends, go for a walk, do this, do that, and actually that will be going against their traditions to do that type of stuff. And I think, yeah, I think the stuff about midwife and, you know, just being mindful that actually our definition of midwife and their definition of midwife is very different, or maybe very different. So, yeah.
I also wonder, like, how many Romani pregnant women as well are kind of go under the radar from our service, especially if they're having to isolate. I think it's quite interesting to think that there's probably so many more women who are dealing with perinatal mental illness, but actually due to their customs, it's something that they're just having to deal with within their community.
Yeah, and I guess that's why they're probably under the bracket of hard to reach.
Yeah, definitely.
They definitely would be hard to reach.
And I guess the whole sort of, not point, but the whole thing around their communities, that they do travel, isn't it? So they'll be with us for a little while and then they're off again, kind of traveling around the country. So it's quite hard to kind of maintain any continuity.
And really, thinking about it, their children probably only really get registered because of their culture, because they don't want to give birth at home. They come to the hospitals, and that's probably the only reason they get registered, I would imagine, because they don't often want them to go to school for very long, do they?
Yeah, but I from what I've read, the reason for having the baby in the hospital is about the contamination and not having the home impure once mum's had the baby, I guess. So that is one of the main reasons for them going into hospital, is not to contaminate the home. And then once she's given birth, everything needs to be thrown away or, you know, sanitized. And then once the baby's been baptized, you know, with oil, and that's usually within the first 2 weeks the baby is baptized.
They don't tend to breastfeed either. I remember what I'm reading, because they believe breastfeeding is unholy. It's like dirty. They don't think it's the right thing to do, so they'll put their baby straight on formula from birth.
Okay, so I didn't come across that, and I guess, you know, I only had a few, but yeah. And is that from? Go on.
Sorry.
Someone's going to say.
I was going to say something. So if that means they're unclean, what do they do for the 9 months plus until babies?
So they're
being
literally
christened?
in isolation.
Just one
and
room.
it doesn't
Bed
say
food.
whether they're in a room, if they're isolated in a home, but then the midwives, which are the elders of the community, will meet their needs, such as the cooking for mum and making sure her and baby's okay. So yeah, once it's been announced that they're pregnant, rather than be like, yay, let's throw a baby shower, it's okay, let's get you isolated, let's wash, let's throw everything you've touched. Don't touch your husband, you're not going to see your husband. And if you do, you have to wear gloves. So yeah, it is very, very.
It's interesting. I wonder how the couple relationship is impacted by this. If you can't, touch or hug or anything that you might need. If you're having a really rubbish pregnancy, can you imagine how more isolating that probably is? If you're then deemed to kind of fits in with your kind of, I'm not good enough, if you have to throw everything away and everything I touch, it just really feeds into that whole negative thought process and that pressure.
Is that isolation from the husband or from the whole kind of community?
From the whole community.
And she's allowed to go outside on her own?
It didn't say whether she's allowed to go out, but she's not supposed to be around her husband or men or the community. So I don't, from the way I read it, is no, she would be sort of kept indoors and her needs will be met by the midwives and the other women within the community.
It's probably more what happens in the smaller villages in Romania, I'm thinking. Probably not so much here. I wonder how loosely it's.
I would imagine, because I did have a traveler patient, and basically she is attending antenatal, attending a clinic, and I was working in the adult community. She was attending all appointments, and she considered herself as very kind of respecting the culture and her background. So maybe it's changing, maybe it's more of historical,
or
not 100% kind of the
I think
to do it.
I think I was talking about Romani travelers, and there is so many variations of traveling communities, and then even if they, they're from the same place, they may have different traditions as well. So so
interesting.
I guess there's probably other traveling communities that maybe next time
At the same time, like the traveling community are quite superstitious. So it can also be seen as a very protective way of looking after the baby, because it's to make sure that she doesn't touch anything, she doesn't get in contact with anything, there's no need for so no bad spirits can get to her. It's extreme, but at the same time you can see the protective factor in it.
So most of their sort of customs and stuff they do is about evading bad spirits and stuff like that. So
Jane, do they have big families?
It didn't say whether they have a big family, but it feels like everybody's a family. So it's just one big community, and they live as if there's 50 people, you're just one big family. So are we ready for Amit's presentation?
No, we're going to keep questions.
Thanks for that, Shireen. I don't even think I'm next.
You're not. I think it's Leela next. Any more questions for Shireen? I have a few, but they've gone out my head all of a sudden. Has anyone else got anything they want to ask?
I'll forward the. Okay, Leela, are you saying something? yeah. Sorry, what's up?
Shireen, I was going to ask whether you came across much about the view of the Romani culture on mental health.
No, I didn't.
I've got a presentation from years ago about mental health in the Romani population. I can dig that out. It was really interesting. We had some training from the traveling community, came and talked to us about mental health. And when it comes to children, it's really, they'll do anything for their children. So if you were going to say, can I come and see you as the mother, they wouldn't be necessarily as interested. But if you say, I'm coming because of your child to help you with your pregnancy and baby, that's always a way in. They will always take that on board because they live for their children and they'll do anything for their children. So it's just a really interesting fact that I came across. And there's obviously a lot of domestic abuse in that community at times as well. So I can imagine all of this traditions probably make things quite difficult as well. Fascinating stuff. Has anyone worked with a Romani lady and has similar? I know, Azar, you mentioned your lady, but has anyone else come across anyone? Because
Yes,
it then highlights.
I did home treatment when I was in home treatment, and there's a whole community that lives under our flyover basically, which we covered. And I have to say, going in there, it was always quite intimidating because you're going right into it's basically a dead end, and then people would crowd all the way behind you, and basically you'd be invited in to see somebody once. But as soon as they got a little bit better, they didn't particularly want to see you anymore. They wanted to be looked after by their own community, is what the feeling we got. So, some of our clinicians would kind of say, what's the point? Because as soon as you got them out of the danger zone, it was just sort of, and that's happened to be even locally engagement.
I think just about let health visitors kind of get involved. So if anything, they might have better access to seeing them and following them up than we will.
You say that, Aki, but I can remember one of the visits, the only reason we sort of felt like we escaped a situation quite quickly is that we happened to know that 2 doors down, or 2 caravans down, children and families were visiting, so they got police and whatever. We just escaped around the back while they were being dealt with. But yeah, I don't know, it seemed really complicated.
And I had another question that just came to mind, and that was like, how much do we ask these questions about their cultural kind of, traditions that they like to follow in pregnancy when we're going to assess somebody? How much do we actually kind of directly ask? Is there anything I need to be thinking of in terms of meeting your cultural needs around this as well? Probably not many.
Would that be difficult if you cannot meet their cultural needs? So as if like you're offering something you might not know first, second, you might not have to offer. So maybe just knowing the culture rather than just, I don't know. Just difficult to promise something we don't know.
I suppose you wouldn't promise anything you couldn't deliver, but you certainly want to know and be aware and document them for others who then might go and pick up them on the journey.
I think you need to be able to signpost, Aki, is probably the main thing, if we can provide it.
Yeah.
We had one in Richmond that Holly, the previous SPR, was looking after, and I knew her from my times at the RST with a psychotic illness, potentially schizophrenia, young lady. Lived very close in that community. Mother was doing everything for her. She became pregnant. We didn't even know she was seeing other people outside the family. So that was the first concern, really, around safeguarding. But they kept dismissing that it was very much wanted baby, couldn't get a proper history. They booked really miles away in a different hospital, very far away. So again, already the liaison was very complicated with maternity. And then we referred to social services, which was already a difficult step because of the diagnosis. And eventually they just closed the case, saying that she would be looked after, the baby would be looked after by the community, and they would only get in touch with us if there was a sort of postpartum psychosis, really, and she needed to be admitted to hospital. She was taking the medication and there was no postpartum psychosis, so they disappeared. But very difficult to assess and very difficult to agree to any plan together. It all felt very, very intrusive. And that was a traveling community, but quite settled, really, in that area with other families. And I'm sure the baby is very well looked after by the community, but it was very difficult to get in, really. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Do we want a 5-minute breather? come back at 15:41 to be precise.
Okay.
Thank you, Shireen and Jill, for this the earlier sessions. We look forward to Leela and Amit.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Standards are getting higher and higher, by the way.
Okay.
So, Leela, you better pull it out the bag. Look at her face. See you in a minute.
Rachel, did you see my comment about that new referral that just popped up?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just writing an email. So I'm just trying to work out. I think I'm just. Oh yeah. When you look at the internal email system, it's got both our referral emails still listed on Outlook, and it's not very. It's if you look at them, I think, and the referral form that Dr. Posse used at the bottom had the old email address. So I think that's what's happened. But I thought it bounced back. So I'm just sending them an email with all the new stuff on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's
It's not urgent, this lady. I know
no,
her.
not at all. She's fine. So now she's fine. So
Just to say, we are recording still.
oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I said anything. It's another referral that came through Archie for Kingston and Richmond, so that's why we need to sort it out. But we haven't said any names or anything.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it was in the radar and we have a plan. Thanks.
That's good.
Jim. Jack. What time is it? The new one. On that phone. Yeah.
Okay, are we all back?
Yeah, have a win.
Okay, hang on, let me see. While people are waiting, I'm going to see if I can share screen, if this works. Does that work?
Something's happening. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm loving all these design templates. They look great.
Okay. Oh God, what am I doing? Sorry. The thing's over the top of my bar. Is it F5? She said, didn't she? Let's try that. No, that's not working.
Slideshow. Press slideshow.
I
Slideshow.
can't see it above my. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it just says a bar covering the top of my bar. Right, there we go. Here it is. Now you can see. So you can tell me when to go.
You can press one of the arrows to the right.
Can I start? Am I allowed to start? Or have I got to wait
Oh,
for
I
people?
don't know.
I don't know. Shireen, you
I
tell
can't
me.
tell if everybody's here. Is everybody here? Can we just make some noise?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I will just
Go ahead. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
All right. So, full disclaimer: I'm not Jewish. Yeah. So all this information I got from a Jewish charity and some recommended websites. So if anybody is Jewish and feels offended or wants to correct something, please do. I will not be offended. So what we're talking about, the people we're talking about, obviously Judaism is the name of the religion. The followers of that religion are called Jews. And you're talking quite a large number of people. You're Jew if you're born of a Jewish mother, or if you've undergone conversion to Judaism, which is quite a formal process. And a Jew who converts to another religion would still be regarded as a Jew. And that can be quite extreme. So if you have a female convert who changes her mind and reverts to her original religion, any children she now has will still be Jewish because she is still Jewish, for example. A person who was not born Jewish and not converted according to Jewish law can hold all the beliefs, keep all the laws and practices, but still would not be considered a Jew. So I suppose we need to consider all of these people, really, that we see. There are loads of denominations, but the main ones, the easiest to think about, are the Orthodox, so people who feel it's important to keep all the rules that were given by God and that these rules cannot change. And there are some more progressive groups that believe that the rules can change. And for example, progressive Jewish people, they might have men and women that can sit together in a synagogue. They might accept women rabbis. Maybe they won't follow the food laws quite as strictly. And the Sabbath might not be observed as strictly. They can still drive and use phones on the Sabbath, for example. So in the main themes that came across when we looked at childbirth practices in Jewish culture was that Jews have a lot of responsibilities. They need to follow the Torah, they need to follow Jewish law and keep customs. They need to behave appropriately and also uphold the standards of their religion to others. And the other big theme that keeps coming up is any big decisions seem to go to the rabbi. Rabbis have decades of learning and studying what they believe is every eventuality that could happen that's written within their sacred texts. However, if there's ever a danger to life, this seems to take priority over any sort of Jewish law or practice according to the religion. So what I'm mainly going to be talking about are Orthodox Jewish customs, and that's because a lot of people who these are sort of the main Jewish laws, and people might decide at the time of pregnancy that they want to follow more of these than at other times of their life. So it's something we need to ask our patients. So in Orthodox Jewish life, marriages are normally arranged, but the couple has the final say whether to go ahead with the marriage or not. They don't really agree with same-sex relationship, but they will tolerate that in other people in society. One of the comments that was interesting from a lady who gave one of the talks about Jewish culture was that she said that extramarital affairs don't happen. I mean, she considered that they must happen, but they're not viewed as acceptable. And yeah. The other things about the Orthodox Jewish women's role is that their main priority should be educating the next generation, running the home and the family, but this is viewed as a really important role in Jewish culture. So the housewife in Hebrew, for example, the translation literally is linchpin. So some Orthodox Jewish women might choose to study, they might choose to work, but these are her main priorities according to religion. Orthodox Jews are also more likely to follow Jewish law around modesty and the way that they dress. So in clinical work, they might not even name certain parts of their body. They might not want to talk about sex life outside of with their husband. Breastfeeding in public might be difficult. Some might wear a shawl. Some won't breastfeed in front of older male children, for example. So now if we look particularly at pregnancy, a lot of responsibility is put on the pregnant women in Jewish culture. And that's because the attitude, behaviour and the nutritional choices of the mother in pregnancy is thought to impact the health and future development of the baby. So they believe that the pregnant women should be surrounded by a positive, calm and tranquil atmosphere, and that anger and anxiety should be avoided whenever possible. And we can see how that might affect some of our patients. And it might also explain why there is considered to be a significant amount of stigma around mental health in particularly Orthodox Jewish communities. The sages encourage women to utilize the pregnancy months by increasing in good deeds and spiritual refinement. So that might mean going to the synagogue, engaging in studying the Torah, the Jewish sacred text, giving extra to charity, or eating only kosher food, so being more specific about their diet during pregnancy. So these are just some of the pregnancy customs that are picked up. So one of them is that pregnancy, some people believe pregnancy should be kept secret from their friends and acquaintances until the 5th month. Some denominations do a lot of mikvah bathing. So the thing on the far right, the pool, that's as a ritual bath, basically. What else is that? Some husband and wife sometimes read specific psalms before bed, for example. It's recommended to check the mezuzahs, which are those things on the middle picture there, which are as a small parchment scroll that's with Hebrew words of a particular text that are handwritten, and they're rolled up and affixed to doorposts in the Jewish homes. And so it's recommended they be inspected by scribes. It's also recommended that women should be exposed to only spiritual and holy sights and sounds, so that the expectant mother should be careful to not gaze at non-kosher animals and other impure things. And that could be because of the deep impact that these sights could have on their unborn children. So, for example, they shouldn't really go to the zoo in pregnancy. And non-kosher animals, we think about, there's pigs we know about, vultures and hawks we might not see very much in the UK, but rabbits, seagulls, I mean, they're kind of around quite a lot. There's also some beliefs that pregnant women shouldn't be exposed to gossip or telling tales, because those things shouldn't happen in Orthodox Jewish life anyway. And probably more important for us is that it's not considered to be good to buy significant items for the baby before the birth, and that's to avoid the evil. So particularly around medicine, so tests which are known to pose a danger to the fetus, like amniocentesis, they cite, for example, they said should be avoided if at all possible. So if it was absolutely necessary, they'd be advised to speak to a rabbi as well as a doctor. So fasting, there are 6 days in the Jewish calendar that are traditional fasting days. 2 of them there that I've put in there, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, pregnant women would be expected to observe to a certain extent, and they should consult a doctor and a rabbi to decide whether to go on with the fast or not. Just for Yom Kippur, for example, if it's felt that they shouldn't fast, they're still advised, for example, to only eat small portions at given intervals, to eat less than an ounce of solid, and drink less than a cheekful of liquid, wait 9 minutes and then repeat. So even if they had to break their fast, there would be advice around that. For induction, there's recommendations not to have birth induced because God should know the best time for a baby to be born. If childbirth is potentially they see childbirth as a potentially life-threatening situation, so you shouldn't be bringing this forward. If the baby is overdue to the extent that its life is in jeopardy, or if there's another medical emergency, it's not forbidden to induce labour, but again, a doctor and a rabbi should be consulted. I just thought I'd put this in about giving birth on the Sabbath. This is particularly Orthodox Jews. So the Sabbath is roughly Saturday. It's from dusk on Friday till sunset on Saturday. It's the Jewish day of rest. There shouldn't be any cooking, spending money, writing, or operating electrical devices for particularly Orthodox Jews. So for delivery in hospital, for example, they'd need to arrange a non-Jewish driver or taxi driver, that the taxi money, for example, is set aside in advance. If they arrive, they wouldn't be able to sign in or anything, or they'd have to sign with their left hand. And just as an aside, if you're doing a home visit or a clinic on a Friday in winter in the afternoon, you don't want to end up seeing them on the Sabbath, because that would need to be avoided. So the niddah state normally starts as a particular state for the woman. It normally starts on the first day of menstruation and lasts about 12 days, and it's ended by a wash and then a ritual mikvah bath. That's the one. The picture on the left is in Philadelphia, apparently. So from the time the woman becomes a niddah, her husband may not see the parts of her body that are normally covered. Some denominations say that the man can't touch the woman. And conjugal relations are forbidden by Jewish law. Why I'm mentioning that is that in pregnancy, the woman becomes a niddah from the first show of blood, so when she feels labour is starting. And that continues until 7 days after the birth of a boy, or until 14 days. Sorry, someone saying something? No? Okay. Or to 14 days after the birth of a girl. Or some people say it's for 12 days. Or it can be for longer if the woman continues to bleed. And what that means is that it can be improper for a husband to watch the actual birth of his child. Some will say that the husband shouldn't be in the delivery room at all during the birth. But if there's no one else to aid his wife, he could be in the room, but he should try as much as possible not to look at the intimate parts of her body, so that he'd have to stay kind of waist up. If the woman goes for a C-section, she wouldn't be considered a niddah until she started bleeding. After delivery, there's various customs that get followed. So there's some blessings to be recited by the husband and the wife. They are different for boys and girls. It's customary to hang a card with a particular prayer, as well as some other prayers in the room of the mother and baby. And the purpose of that is to expose the child to only holy sites from the beginning of his or her life. So even while still in hospital, the parents might hang this prayer on the wall near the door of the room. Also interesting is apparently you shouldn't lose your temper in the presence of a new mother and her baby. So doing so might adversely affect them. That's one of the beliefs. Obviously, I think a lot of people have heard about circumcision if the baby is a boy. There's also this rare, it's now apparently quite a rare feast, this feast of the firstborn son. And it really only applies to if the baby is the first child of the mother. So it doesn't need to happen if the mother has had a daughter before. It doesn't happen if there's a C-section. It doesn't happen if there's a miscarriage before the birth of the boy. But it's just something to be aware of, that it's something that people might need to observe if people remain in hospital or get admitted after they have their babies. Postnatally, normally the new mother doesn't leave the house without accompaniment for 7 days, but the baby does count as an accompaniment for that reason. Women who've had a baby are exempt from most fasts for 2 years following the birth, And there are 2 exceptions to that rule, which are the same as in pregnancy, the Tish B'Av and the Yom Kippur. A woman who's had baby should thank God for having protected her and her baby from harm. So this is the kind of blessing that you'd have to arrange for somehow happening if the woman remained in hospital or got transferred to a psychiatric unit, for example. And normally, so it might be a blessing, the presence of 10 male relatives, or it could be that the family might arrange for the first trip out of the home to be to a synagogue. So those things need to be thought about. Other considerations for admission is that whether it's extended on the postnatal ward or an MBU, is to think about the Orthodox Jewish woman's role in the home is to ensure the family eats kosher, to ensure children recite their prayers, to prepare the home from the Sabbath. So it's a major role in the home, and not being at home is a big deal, and not being home on the Sabbath is even worse. So, for example, when it gets towards the weekend, a woman might be feeling more and more upset about not being at home. For example, there are even exceptions in Jewish law for the husband to be the one to light the candles if the woman isn't around in the home. So, I mean, that's how sort of serious it is. And the other thing to remember is that the synagogue normally has an infrastructure to support women. So they'll have groups and charities from the synagogue that might deliver meals, that help children with their homework, for example. And so we're lucky that in northwest London there is a charity that provided most of the information that I got today, called Menucha. It covers Barnet, but actually provides advice to health professionals across the country, and it normally provides advice and support to Jewish Orthodox women who've got perinatal mood disorders, and they're also campaigning to improve access to culturally appropriate services. So they want to promote understanding and learning. So they actually provided an 1.5 hour long video for me for this presentation, which thankfully I did not share with you, but I'm happy to share if you want. And what they're
Can you say that in the shared drive, maybe?
Yeah, it's an MP4 file on a Google Drive, but I can have a look. So that charity actually consists of Orthodox Jewish therapists, so they're psychologists, and they provide psychology input to the perinatal mental health service in Barnet. So they're very kind of well-informed charity. For example, one of the things they raised was, I think, like you mentioned previously, about domestic violence seems to happen in some communities that are more sort of closed off from the rest of society. So in the more ultra-Orthodox denominations, where women might not have chosen to access education for reasons I've mentioned before, they have encountered within their charity a few women that have said, that when they've spoken to peers in the synagogue, and they've said that they're victims of domestic abuse from their husbands, their peers have said, well, it's your husband, that doesn't count as domestic abuse. What I'm hearing from the Orthodox women in that charity is that actually, if they spoke to the rabbi would support the woman. So it's not a church thing. It seems to be a cultural thing, or a being removed from society type of thing. And so these are some of the really helpful links that they gave me. Basically, this www.shabbat.org is like Jewish Wikipedia. I mean, it's massive resource online, and I think would be great for any patients we see. It even has an Ask the Rabbi function. The customs of pregnancy and birth that's online there covers something like 7 chapters. I mean, it's really an extensive thing. Those are the details from Menucha, and there's also a Jewish Women's Aid with separate helplines as well in the UK.
The lady who set up the Menucha charity did a big talk at one of our perinatal training days.
Yeah,
I think probably some people remember it. She was she was very, very passionate and about it, and it was very good talk. Unfortunately, she ran out of time. They had to rush her, so
I think that's probably who I listened to for 1.5 hours the other day.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very rich community as well. They were obviously very wealthy, this community.
Well, it depends. It very much depends. It's because obviously there's a lot of push to give to charity. So even if, I used to cover Barnet, and I used to see a lot of people from the Orthodox Jewish community. Apparently they're finding it difficult to reach out to them at the moment. I didn't find that community particularly hard to reach when I saw them. However, I didn't have any difficult, if any of these kind of difficult things came up, like amniocentesis and all that, I sense I would have had to find a rabbi to support me in helping these patients and their families. But yeah.
So interesting.
Do we have any questions for Leela? Have you finished, Leela? Do you want?
I've finished. Sorry. Yes, I finished. Yeah.
Any questions
for
Leela?
I wonder if there's a rabbi locally who we can consult in case of any issues.
So Lena, yes, in that I didn't contact the rabbi, but I'm aware that, for example, Wimbledon, I feel like I've been through conversion therapy through all this stuff that I've been sent. But yeah, there was a synagogue in Wimbledon that's moved to where Roehampton Uni is. So it basically covers Merton and Wandsworth. And I think that would probably be who we contact. They have stronger links with homeless charities than with this type of charity. But also, Manuka are saying they would provide advice to us as professionals. They provide advice to people in Manchester, for heaven's sake, and we're in London. So I think, yeah.
I think part of the Wandsworth Community Engagement Network, there may be a Jewish a rabbi there that is part of that.
Yeah.
That we could find out, at least have the details. So if I'll find out and share them with you.
Is that our nearest Jewish Orthodox community, Barnet, then, to here?
I don't know. I mean, I have to say, when I say it, it's there's a large population in North London, in Barnet and surrounding boroughs. And that I had more than one patient, and I was only a perinatal psychiatrist, for heaven's sake. So, and I haven't seen any here yet, but then that could be the way we're working. I don't know.
I think there's a big community in kind of the Tower Hamlets area too, City and Hackney, Bethnal Green area as well.
Mm.
You're an expert apparently now.
Thanks. Right. I have to take the pictures out when I save this because I just picked them randomly, but so I'll take them out and then I'll save it. Yeah.
Great.
Good. Thank you.
Anything else before we move on? It's been lovely. So if anything Jewish related, Leela is your woman to go to. Amit, how are you doing for starting yours?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Is everybody ready for the last one? Okay, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen. It feels really strange to have the presentation and not be able to see anyone. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to start with a disclaimer that I am not Hindu. And it sounds like Leela managed to find an amazing resource online and some charities, but I really struggle to do the same for Hinduism. So a lot of this information has come from an aunt of mine who is Hindu and her husband who is Sikh, but has grown up around, obviously with her, and around the Hindu culture and the Indian culture. And the second disclaimer I want to make is just how broad Hinduism is. I mean, there are so many different beliefs within Hinduism, and in some respects there are specific things I'll talk about that are to do with Hindu religion, but it's really entwined with culture, and that will vary not only within India itself but across the world as well. So I think I saw that there are 1.2 billion Hindus across the world and 827 million in India. So beliefs are going to vary. So this is just a really like small snapshot of some beliefs, and I think that there is going to be loads that I'm missing out. So equally, if anyone here knows more about Hinduism or practices Hinduism, then please jump in or like chip in at the end.
I think just earlier in the chat, I put that program on the BBC iPlayer, and it's really interesting, and it's called Being Jewish, Being Hindu, and in that it also does talk a lot about you can't separate the religion and culture aspect in Hinduism. They are so entwined. You can't focus on one without the other. But they're really good programs to watch because they cover life, death, marriage, coming of age, all of those sort of stuff, which is really interesting. Sorry, back over to you.
No, thanks for that. I can't see anyone, so I'm just gonna have to. You're gonna have to tell me when I can continue. Can't read on verbal cues. Okay, so this is just, I just thought I'd start generally with beliefs, and again, this could be quite biased. So generally, the belief is that pregnancy is a blessing and a time to be celebrated in a woman's life or a family's life, and women are really encouraged to support, to enjoy their pregnancy, and to really have a sense of kind of relaxation and nurture during their pregnancy, kind of a woman nurturing their body and being nurtured by the other people in their family. There are lots of beliefs about the mental well-being of mum impacting on baby, and so a lot, I think what I've understood is that a lot of the beliefs that have developed have come from, well, if we look after mum's mental health and well-being and physical health, then that will then relay to the baby as well. My aunt and uncle gave the example of mothers being encouraged to read religious books, stories, scriptures, and listen to religious songs. I don't know how prevalent that is, but that was just one example they gave of how a mother might be kind of encouraged to look after her mental well-being. So some of the examples they gave of Hindu practices during pregnancy were that women are encouraged to try and cover their stomachs with a shawl or a scarf. Again, I don't know how common this is. I don't know if this is something that's practiced widely with Hindu women in the UK, and I really couldn't find anywhere when I was doing my research for the rationale for that. My aunt and uncle were talking about trying to kind of keep the belly warm, and I think from what I've gathered that there are beliefs in Ayurveda, which is a huge subject in itself that I know very little about. There are beliefs about Ayurveda about, for example, hot and cold foods, but also how to kind of nurture your body in different ways by the different things you do. So I wonder if maybe covering your stomach during pregnancy and also after the birth might relate to that. So during the 7th month of pregnancy, there is a ritual where women are given certain foods. Again, I think some of these foods might relate to that kind of idea of hot and cold foods from Ayurveda that women are meant to avoid or eat more of. An example that I was given was mothers being asked to drink water slowly, and I think they were talking, when I was speaking to my aunt and uncle, they were talking about trying to reduce stress on the digestive system in case that kind of puts additional stress on the belly or on the fetus. So they were also talking about avoiding foods that might give you constipation and things like that. So again, I don't know how much of that comes from Ayurveda and how much that's kind of broadly practiced across Hinduism across the world. So one of the things I came across that I found quite interesting is that women are encouraged to, well, during pregnancy, in some families, women are given massages by the older women in their family. My aunt and uncle said a traditional nurse, but in other research, it kind of said like the mum's mum or the mother-in-law might give the mother-to-be a massage. And this all comes back to the idea of really trying to encourage the mum to be calm during the pregnancy and relax and just enjoy the kind of celebration that is pregnancy, that they believe. And then once, and I'll come on to it later, but then once the baby is born, they also do that with the baby. This is something that my aunt and uncle spoke about that I really couldn't find any more information about. So I don't know if this is kind of a more cultural belief that's maybe been passed through generations, but encouraging women to kind of do activities on the floor to help, I don't know, maybe to build muscles, to build the pelvic muscles, I'm not sure, but the language they used was to help ease delivery. Women are really encouraged to go and stay with their parents. It might be that they're already staying with parents, as is often the culture in India, but certainly in more Western societies, where families have already kind of separated and children are living away from their parents, as in adult children are living away from their parents. Women are sometimes encouraged to go and stay back with their parents for that period in the run up to the birth and then afterwards. So obviously this is going to vary across different families. I think traditionally women, used to or might still take on quite a lot of household work and things like kind of keeping the house tidy and cooking during kind of the late stages of pregnancy and after the birth. They're sort of not expected to do any of that usual household work that they might be asked to do usually. So that's kind of taken on by the kind of, say, the mother-in-law or the other kind of relatives in the house might take on some of that to kind of alleviate that. So there's no expectations on the mother usually in the run up to the birth or after the birth. So family, friends and neighbours, I imagine that in India this would be much more relevant than perhaps in the UK, where we just live in a more individualistic society. But traditionally, family, friends and neighbours would all come and support the new mother. They might take care of the baby at times. They might, I think I've got it on the next slide. They might change with help changing nappies. They might help, I guess, just generally helping mum to stay relaxed and recover. And then this is the thing I was talking about earlier about the family in the neighbourhood helping by giving massages to the child as the child grows up as well. So after the birth, the mother and the child are not required to leave the home for 40 days. Now, this is a belief that definitely differs across Hindus. I think it's up to 40 days. I think for some families it might be shorter than that. But I think there's something about 40 days that is quite meaningful in Hinduism after the birth. I think that's the kind of time frame when that's really kind of encouraged. Mothers are encouraged to just kind of promote their recovery and look after themselves, and for, I guess, that time for baby and mum to bond as well. Traditionally, mum is given special foods to help her postpartum recovery. So things like jaggery, which is a kind of sugary substance, it's like a form of sugar, unrefined sugar, I think. Cumin seeds, carom seeds, almonds, warm cardamom infused to help aid the recovery as well. And again, I think some of these do come from Ayurveda. The cloth being wrapped around the stomach that I spoke around earlier happens after delivery as well. This is one I wanted to include this, but again, it's not one that I found much information on. This came from my aunt and uncle, that they were saying that some mothers refrain from washing their hair, only allowed mild hair, washing your hair once a week to 10 days after birth. Again, I don't know how much that's practiced, but I guess it's interesting. Some of the things I was hearing from my aunt and uncle, they've come from somewhere. They've come from beliefs. They've grown up in India, and this is all kind of relevant cultural information that's still relevant today from their perspective. But it's just how much of that is being carried on today in the UK, I'm not clear on. And then the baby massage again. So I think most of what I've spoken about so far is to do with perhaps more cultural elements, but there are some really specific religious ceremonies that are practiced after the birth. So there's usually a naming ceremony, and this is usually done by a Hindu priest. This happens at different times for different people. So some people say it's the 11th or 12th day after the birth. Some people say it's 28 days after the birth. Some people say it's 40 days after the birth. And the name that is given traditionally might have been based on the lunar calendar, or after an ancestor, or after a deity. But I think in today's society that's becoming less common. Today's families tend to be going down a more kind of westernized route of either inventing new names or even using kind of more English or Western names entirely. So you might find that with some of the families that we see, some might be still using more traditional names and some might not be. In the early couple of weeks, there's also a ceremony that's performed that's like a cleansing ritual or purifying ceremony. So this is where I think it might be a priest that comes to the house again and sprinkles holy water around the home, and some sources have said they might also sprinkle holy water on the mother and the baby and the other family members, and that's really just to kind of cleanse the house of any, from what I understand, any kind of ill, I guess kind of ill wishes. So the chola ceremony is something I've heard less about. This is perhaps the first time that the extended family might come and meet the baby. Some of the sources I was looking at said that a mother and baby in some instances might not actually leave the house for the first 40 days either. So I didn't know if that related to this chola ceremony or not. And then this last point about the black dot, this relates to that idea of kind of warding off ill wishes. So you might notice that some Hindu children or babies have a little black dot put on their head or their cheek or behind their ear, or kind of black thread put around their wrist or their ankle, or their waist, and that's to ward off evil spirits or ill wishes from other people as well. Usually I think it's with like coal or cudgel, which is the same stuff that people use as eyeliner. So it's that kind of like soft black pencil that they use that black dot with. So beliefs about breastfeeding. I was reading that in some families, colostrum is believed to cause harm to the baby. And so in some instances, perhaps more in the past, that the colostrum was discarded and infants were given cow's milk, honey or water instead. Apparently that belief is changing across India and is really not practiced very much in the UK, but it might be worth just us knowing about it in case you do come across any Hindu women who do hold that belief and who are holding off on breastfeeding. And again, the kind of elder women in the family might support with that. I think I've said a lot of this already. So elder support or external family support with changing nappies, the baby massage, just generally kind of soothing the baby. And this is, as I said before, really to promote mum's recovery and help her not feel stressed and overwhelmed. I asked my aunt and uncle what they thought about how how beliefs are changing as society kind of modernizes. And they said that generally the beliefs around pregnancy being a blessing are still the same. The rituals that I mentioned earlier, those kind of religious ceremonies, might be a bit harder to practice or might be prioritized a bit less, but I guess the general kind of more spiritual or cultural beliefs about pregnancy being a time of celebration is still really important. My aunt and uncle were talking about how there are some concerns about work causing more stress for mum and child, particularly if both parents are working and there's less space for perhaps kind of nurture of the mother. But I guess they were kind of saying as long as people are aware of the need to look after yourself, it's kind of much easier to balance those stresses. So I think that was it really. I guess the things that I didn't really speak to my aunt and uncle when I was talking to them, things I didn't really hear much about were things like, I mean, I think my aunt and uncle are really quite spiritual people and very religious, so I think a lot of this information I got was quite skewed by that. But I'm really quite aware that there's a huge rates of domestic violence in India and in Indian culture across the UK, in Hindu culture as well. And I sometimes wonder how that actually fits in with this idea of pregnancy being a time of blessing and celebration. I'm sure that's probably not the experience of lots of women that we see, and I guess I just wanted to say just to hold that in mind, that yeah, I'd be really curious about what women feel like their role are, what their responsibilities are, and how that fits with perhaps within that relationship dynamic, what a man's expectation is, because it could well be different from the understanding that my aunt and uncle have shared with me. So yeah, that's where I've got to. But yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone else has any other understanding of Hinduism, or yeah, please do share.
It's very similar to Sikhism and as well, and I don't know if Lena and Bav agree about Gujarati practices as well, are also probably a lot of those that have been spoken about already, but they just vary in different ways slightly, don't they?
Yeah, I think Amit hit the nail on the head that there was just so much variation, and that culture and religion are so intertwined. I could not tease apart, what part is Hinduism, what part is culture. It's completely blended. But I can relate to a lot of those things that you've mentioned in your talk, Amit. And even though I've grown up in the UK, I think a lot of that is still practiced. I think there is some variation on some of it. So, for example, when you were talking about that postnatal care, it is still very closely held that it's important for the mum to be well looked after postnatally. And I know that when my sister was, she recently had a baby, rather than she going to stay with my mum actually went to go stay with her. So, but it was still for that same period of time, and my sister was largely not leaving the house, and she was just caring for baby, and the priority was just looking after mum's health, and my mum did a lot of the the newborn care as well. But yeah, very interesting. I'm happy to answer any other questions if other people have anything about Hinduism or Indian culture.
It's quite interesting to talk about cultures, because what I noticed is sounds like common themes for all kind of presentations. It's like the importance of nutrition, which is also in my culture, and also important of being calm and relaxed, and just like looking after the mental health of the pregnant and postnatal, during pregnancy and postnatal. And also notice that I love numbers, I know. They all have numbers during pregnancy and postnatally. It's like the importance, like kind of certain months, or then postnatally, the 7 days, the 2 weeks, the 40 days, the 100 days. There's always there with the kind of numbers. And I think there's also similarities there in my culture, which is quite interesting. And I think the other one is I notice is the importance of nutrition, especially warm food, which is really interesting. Thanks for everyone.
Yeah, that's been great. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
I guess I was along similar themes. I was just thinking,
Can't hear you, Mel, sorry.
Sorry, I think this is a problem Lena and I are having with these laptops that we've got. They go in and out, so I'll shout as loud as I can. Amit, I was thinking, whilst you were talking, I was just thinking about so many of my friends from different cultures and that, from all over the world and things, and even my own family in Sweden as well, and various things, commonalities that come out all over the place. Which is fascinating, isn't it? Like, we're talking about difference, all these different cultures and child rearing practices and during pregnancy, and actually there are all these common themes. And like, even I know it's not practiced now, but I know, I mean, I'm sure all of you have, you watch films or you hear about things from other times, like even in the UK, that were very normal practices, like years and years and years ago, like the confinement of during pregnancy and postnatally as well. That did used to happen, didn't it? In the UK, it was more common practice, which we don't talk about, but things like that. There seems to be that commonality, I think, across different cultures, and it's interesting what things we've lost here, how things have blended in a way. But yeah, and even listening as well, I know you said about the it's hard to unpick what is the religious practices and what is the cultural as well. And I was thinking in terms of things you talked about as well, my friends who are from India, but they're Catholic, they're practicing Catholics. And actually, you know, some of the things you talked about, I know they're probably not about Catholicism, they're more about cultural practices as well. So I think it's fascinating to just hear all this and talk about it. It really helps in terms of being able to think about the patients, and I think how we phrase things and talk about things in the room as well, and don't rush in too quickly with our own prejudices, I guess, and expectations about how things should be. Sorry, I'm going to stop now because I could keep on going and going.
Thanks, Mel. And that just made me think about how the language we use might also change the way we interpret what happens. So Mel, you just mentioned confinement, and when I was doing the research, that so a lot of the sources that I was seeing, I didn't trust them, so I didn't cite them, as in I didn't know how reliable they were, because there's just so much information out there. But some of them did use the word confinement, this kind of 40-day confinement period after birth, and then other sources didn't use that word and promoted it more as kind of recovery. And so I think the word confinement sometimes has connotations, and I'm sure that's true for lots of different things I've spoken about. It can be, depending on the language you're using, it could either be construed as a positive or something that kind of deprives you of your liberty. And I think that changes over time.
Any other questions?
No question, but I just think it's been such a great day. And particularly, I mean, it was great this morning, but the cultural sessions this afternoon, I don't know, it just kind of, it really gives you a bit of space and sort of time in your mind to, I don't know, it just helps you gather yourself a little bit, I think, to sort of really have a look at the different cultures. And we're so busy all the time with everything, to actually just stop and turn everything else off and listen to something like this is really, really refreshing. I found it really great. It's a lovely idea, Aki.
Thank you. What was I going to say? It makes me think of all the women I've worked with, and actually perhaps, you know, what I learned along the way, and actually how quickly you forget because the next person comes along, and, you know, it just so easily gets diluted, everything you learn, and you need sessions like this to just bring everyone together. And actually it really shows the diversity in the room and in our team, that we've all got this all this amazing kind of stuff to bring together. I was going to say one of the words, I feel kind of rich with knowledge today. I might not sleep because I'll be still thinking about it, but it's been really lovely. And you've all done some amazing stuff in going out and finding all this information as well. So I really do appreciate that, because I know you're all busy, and so much to do and stuff, but you have really all kind of nailed it, really. So standards are getting even higher for the next 4, which I've just sent on the chat as to who's next as well. I think Kiki is going to do a session, so she might take some of my slot to do her session. It's in June. It's not the 2nd of June, it's just session 2 is in June. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. Does anyone have it? I think Philippe is asking. Let me see.
There's 2nd of June on the chat.
No, it's the 16th of June. It's session 2. The 2nd of June, it's not together. It just means session 2, June. So I'll put it on there, 16th.
Okay, could you send us how long we need to block off? Because it was really helpful knowing that we had.
Yeah, I sent invites for the whole year.
Okay, whoops.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. Sorry, I was going to say that as well, because admin, we don't get log off time, so we've missed a lot of this. That is, you know, I don't even think Trudy's on, but we're missing all these sessions, and I just think this is the first one I've had time to sit on. And even some of the other sessions, you know, we answer majority of the phones. At least we sort of know a little bit more, but we've not been scheduled for any time. So I'm the only one so far that has managed a couple of hours today. But I think admin needs to be involved in more of these sort of meetings, because I found this very interesting today.
Yeah.
But we don't get given the time. Yeah.
We have recorded it, so I mean, I think it'd be difficult for you all to come at the same time, but in taking it in turns and then being able to look at the recording will hopefully help as well. So we've got sessions every month booked in for 2-hour slots now every month going forward, and then the next in June I'll let you know who's coming to in July. I think there's August, perhaps we don't have one because of summer holidays and things. It's 2 hours. I've kind of spread them across different days so that they don't impact one particular day for one particular team or area or person. But yeah, I think we could probably wrap up now and end the day, and just to say, you know, I know you've all taken time out today and not done anything so clinical, let's say, although you're probably doing it behind the scenes, as Leela is raising her eyebrows. That's it then, really.
Thank
anything
you.
else?
Need to go.
Okay. Anybody else before we can all say goodbye? No? Well, have a lovely half an hour left. Don't do too much is all I'll say. So I'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
I will send something for you.
Bye.
Bye.
Now.
Bye.
Bye.
Matilda, I can hear you. Are you all right?
It was just, I know that Az has been sending some emails about the huddle for Sutton, but I'm just going to do it now. So I was just saying, so I'm doing it now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
No
Yeah.
problem.
And I'm going to, has anybody heard from Trudy then? Because is Trudy all right? Because